Our first presenter today to talk in the category of our run showcase, because we have three categories of presentations, tips and ideas, thoughts and suggestions on how to run your business. So our presenter today is Andy Magnus. So Andy, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Glenda. And let me see if I can get my screen to share here.
Look at you.
We're good.
Okay, do you see my slides? Because I'm not seeing them.
We are.
Okay, I'll just assume that they're there and you tell me if they're not. Okay. So good morning, I'm Andy Magnus. Looks like my cat has just joined us in time for the presentation. I'm a CPA, profitability advisor, speaker, author, and humorist. We're going to talk today about the power of words, because the power of words dictates so much of what we do in our life. This quote, I think, says a great deal. The words are singularly the most powerful force available to humanity. Of course, we have atomic weapons and other things, but I think the overall lasting is our words. If we look back at what has lasted over time, we take a look at some of the great documents, the Magna Carta, the Constitution of the U.S., and some of the philosophical writings. They have really lasted and become powerful over the ages. So today I'm going to be presenting ideas and concepts that some are researched, others are based on my observations. So I would encourage you to question everything that I say today and then decide if, based on what you have observed, it's true for you. And really, I'll feel free to share your comments and thoughts or to my email or in the comments section. So the desired outcome, would like for you to walk away today with an ability to kind of increase your awareness of your communications and words that you use and communicate more intentionally and effectively, developing skills for better understanding. And hopefully this will be an ongoing thing for you, because again, anything we do to improve our communication can do nothing more than improve our lives. So when we started communicating, as we take a look at children, they start off with feelings or impressions, and then add to that, we have sounds and pictures and other things that we then start focusing on things before we actually learn our language. And as we learn our language and get to develop it, we gain some eloquence, we hope, or maybe we manipulate other people with our language. But it's so many things we can do with our words. So words are basically building blocks, if you think about it. They're the words that we put together create phrases and sentences, which then establish communications with other people. And then hopefully the communications can lead to understanding. And of course, sometimes we understand, as we've seen on social media, a great deal. It can create conflict. So we use our building blocks to our best benefit. So let's take a look at word. My favorite dictionary happens to be the World Book Dictionary, and it's older. And so there's 11 definitions of the word word. So that means there's for sure 12, because it doesn't include the Microsoft product. So word is a noun, and it's a noun by the first definition that is a sound or a group of sounds that has meaning and it is an independent unit of speech. So when we look at that, it being a noun, well, a noun is a word used in the name of a person, place, thing, quality, or event. Basically, a noun is a label or a symbol, and unto itself, it certainly has some meanings, but by itself, it does better when you associate it with other words. So the meanings that we apply to these labels will depend a great deal on the content with the other words that we're using. We combine and we mix them. It's much like making a cake. We can certainly have the flour and the eggs and the milk and the sugar and of course the chocolate. that we add together. And when we mix those, they create a content. Now we have to do something with that content. We have to actually bake it before we can eat it, unless you have one of the bakeless cakes. So putting those ingredients together can create wonderful things or not so wonderful things. I've heard it said that in Europe, the French can take mediocre ingredients and create a magnificent meal, but the British, on the other hand, can take magnificent ingredients and create a mediocre meal. So it depends on what you're doing with it. It also depends the words that you use on the context in which you're using them. It's the other things around. What setting are you in? For instance, if I'm doing a tax talk to other tax professionals, then I will be using a certain kind of language. We may be talking internal revenue code sections, but if I'm talking to one of my clients and start spouting internal revenue code sections, I observe that there's a glaze that goes over their head, their eyes, and we get a bobbleheaded effect. The head's nodding, but nothing's going on. And we see that often in the technical fields. We see that in medical, legal, frequently tax and accounting, and most frequently in IT. I know for me, IT just stands for the internet thing. It's just something that's different. The other thing that we attach to words is the experience we've had with those particular words. Is it, what's happened in the past? A lot of times we have emotions that are tagged onto those words that bring up things when you hear the words or when you use the words. There's that passion that goes with it, or fear, or other things. And the fourth thing we look at is what time period are we speaking in, because words evolve over time, and the definition that I have for a word may be very different than the definition of a millennial has for that same word. When I went to elementary school long ago in a galaxy far, far away, the dictionary I had was the Webster Dictionary for Boys and Girls. And when you look up the word computer, it says one who computes. So clearly, if I'm reading a book from a period of time, it is best to use a dictionary from that period of time, which unfortunately, the internet does not give you that differentiation. So when we have these words and we put them together, we create ideas and with meanings and with phrases and sentences. And it's important that you understand the meanings of the words that you're using. So if we look at words, how often have we been reading and we just come to a word, and we were taught, at least I was, that you try and look at the context and figure out what the word is. Well, that's not always accurate, shall we say, because again, we're making the assumption that we know what that topic is about or the subject is about. There's a phenomenon when you're studying that is the phenomenon of the misunderstood word. When you're reading something, have you ever gotten to the bottom of the page and you say, I have no idea what's on that page. I think we've all experienced that. And so when you look at that, there's a studying of the study technology. If you go back to the last time you connected to that material and look just before it, you'll find that there's a misunderstood word. And if you'll go in and look at all the definitions of that word and clear it and use it in sentences, you'll have a better grasp of what that word really means. And you'll find frequently that that material just all of a sudden pops back for you because it's just cleared that word for you. Same thing happens in speaking. Have you ever been talking to somebody and all of a sudden they glaze over? Chances are they have a misunderstood word also on something you've said. Again, I see that in the tax arena because that gets very technical. So when you're choosing your words, you also have to look at who your audience is. Like I say, the tax professional versus the client. What's their level of education? What's their background? Where are they from? There's a big difference between the King's English or the Queen's English, as the case may be, and the colonies. Likewise, if you go to different parts of the country, there's certainly a difference in the words that they use. When you're trying to order a carbonated drink, it could be a soda, it could be pop, it could be a Coke. Yeah, order a Coke and they ask what kind, in some areas of the country, or a soft drink. Of course, if you order a Coke in New York, no telling what you'll get, but that's a whole nother story. And then the other thing we have to look at, and Richard talked about this last month on in 7 levels of communication, is how are you conveying this information? Are you doing it in a text, an email, or are you doing it in person, in a video call, on a recorded call? That can make a very big difference. One of the things that Michael Mayer talks about in the 7 levels of communication is that you look at how you're conveying things. You take a look at, are you trying to influence, or are you trying to create information? Creating information, text and emails are great. Although, who of us has not sent an email that has been totally misinterpreted by the other side? It certainly happens all the time. If you're trying to influence, then you use more personal kinds of communication, a personal note, a phone call, a Zoom call, or perhaps even a presentation if you're doing it that. And Karen, in her presentation last month, talked about the words are really such a small part of what we communicate. So there's hand gestures, there's tone, there's tempo, the other things that add so much meaning to words that the written word cannot convey. So again, choosing those words will be all important to who you're talking to and where you're talking to them. So when we create phrases, we hopefully create communication, and all of our communication is two-terminal, which means there's somebody initiating and somebody receiving, and frequently it goes back and forth. And this is true on all our communications. And our idea is for the other person to duplicate exactly what we're saying. As I mentioned, frequently that takes a little bit of work when you're working from different places. And this is also true when you're talking with yourself. Self-talk creates a great deal in the quality of our life. So when we're communicating, we want to communicate not only content, but what is our intent? We've all been in networking situations where we're talking to somebody and it's definitely a one-way communication coming at you. But our idea, if we're trying to get content and connection and communication going, we want some effects and we want some outcomes. And of course, words are only a part of it. The phrases and sentences, like I say, we have communicating with others, either one-on-one or small groups, larger groups, and our communication with ourselves. And it's all important. Think about what you say to yourself, whether it's consciously or not. Oh, I saw, I had a meal over at this restaurant and it's to die for. What are you telling yourself? So be aware of what the words you're using. I'm going on a diet. That's why most diets are not successful, because you're going to die in the diet. At least at some level, you're aware of that. And the communication then, we hope, will create understanding, which the understanding part of communication, it means we'll create some affinity where we really like each other and we share a reality. And that's been somewhat, I won't say destroyed, but damaged in this current society. And when you have communication, that will establish affinity and it'll establish the reality. And when you think of it in a triangle, when we first meet a person, we really don't know much about them. We don't have a shared reality. We don't really know who they are, but we start communicating with them. And if we look at the triangle, and one in each corner, the affinity, reality, and communication, as we communicate more, then it grows and we create some affinity, we share some reality, and it grows bigger and larger, and we get to communicate better and create understanding. Likewise, if we've had damage to a relationship, one of the corners, if you look at it, one of the corners has been damaged and it brings the size of that understanding down. We can use that tool to create connections and create outcomes for ourselves in our lives and in our business. I think I love what Winston Churchill said. He says, tact is the ability to tell someone to go to hell in such a way that they look forward to the trip. So again, that's good communication. So some of the common mistakes we run into is, of course, when we're communicating without listening to the other side. We're not duplicating them. It's more of a one-way conversation. The what's in it for me, radio station WIIFM, what's in it for me. And not knowing your audience is another common mistake. If you don't know where their level of knowledge of their background or other things, using the wrong dictionary, the wrong definition of a word can get you in trouble in many, many ways. So make sure that the definition you're using is the one that's appropriate for that particular content you're doing. We can also turn people off in our communication with words in a level of formality. Sometimes if you get too formal, you fail to make those connections with people. We've talked to people like that who use big words and they try and impress us, and in reality, they put us off. And of course, there's trigger words that we may or may not know that people have, that you can say a word and it immediately throws them into a tizzy or anger or something. So just be aware of that and acknowledge it when that happens. And then, of course, using the wrong medium to communicate the kind of information you want, trying to influence somebody with an email rather than calling them but just giving information. Michael Mayer in his book talks about this real estate agent sent a contract to a client. This was a first-time buyer, and they just sent it in an email without being able to go through the contract, and they ended up backing out of the contract because, again, they needed some hand-holding. It's important to use the right medium at the right time. And one more thing that's a common mistake that many people fall into, I tend to not, but we'll quote Groucho Marx here: if you're not having fun, you're doing something wrong. So actually, I prefer to say that if you're having fun, you're doing something right. There's different perspectives on that. And one of the ways that I personally enjoy using words is using puns. And I would invite you to go to Facebook, and I have a page called The Punch Line, and by all means ask to be invited. It's the artful use of the language for grown-ups, for those of you who grown at wordplay. And I'd be more than happy to invite you. My email is at the top and bottom there. So if we change our words, we can change our world. And hopefully you'll gain some things to be aware of. You'll be intentional about the words you use and the impact you're having on people, and know the definitions of the words you're using. It may surprise you how often we have definitions incorrect. So here's another quote from the learned Rabbi Yehuda Berg. He says, words have energy and power with the ability to help, to heal, to hinder, to hurt, to harm, to humiliate, and to humble. Words have the ability to do those things, and that gives it a great deal of power. So I want to thank you for investing your time today and coming. Certainly, if you have any questions, Will, is there anything in the question box? I've been focusing on the presentation, but is there anything that we need to address? Or if you have any comments or observations, please, by all means, this is the time.